Good morning and welcome, Neil Chatterjee. Neil is the former commissioner and chairman at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and he's joining us today to give us an interview that we will be playing at the ARC Forum coming up in the first week of June regarding the future of electric generation. So welcome, Neil. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So, the electric industry is in great times of change. So let me ask you a few questions that seem to be relevant to your background. What are some of the biggest policy and regulatory issues that are influencing the future of electric generation? And which ones of those can FERC influence?
Sure. Look, I think FERC is a central player in the policy debates that will go forward regarding the energy transition. Look, this is an exciting time to be focusing on the energy transition and to be in the energy space. But there are a number of considerations that come to bear with the energy transition. We've got to ensure reliability and resource adequacy, and FERC plays a critical role there. We have to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place for the grid of the future. This includes transmission infrastructure, working through interconnection challenges, ensuring that we have adequate pipeline capacity to maintain reliability. And then finally, the markets are a big player in the energy transition. I'm a big proponent of markets. I think markets have benefited consumers, the economy, as well as the environment. We continue to squeeze carbon out of the U.S. power sector because of efficient markets. And FERC has a critical role in the oversight of those markets. And so FERC's a central player in all of these key areas.
So another question then, of course we have wholesale energy markets and we have ancillary service markets, but I was listening to our ISO New England, because I'm from the Boston area, and Gordon Van Wheely, I think is the CEO there, and he was basically saying he needs new markets, he needs new capacity markets that don't exist today. How does FERC interact with those new markets that seem to be needed?
Yeah, so it's been a real challenge, particularly in the capacity markets. What we have seen in New England and elsewhere is an effort to balance state policies with the efficient function of markets. And it's something we wrestled with at FERC in New England, in New York, in PJM in particular, trying to strike that appropriate balance between sending the right and accurate market signals while doing what we can to accommodate the individual decisions that states are making regarding their own generation mix. Look, I believe that states have the right and obligation to make decisions about resource adequacy in their own generation mix. But when you have a multi-state market, I think it's incumbent upon the federal regulator to ensure that we strike that right balance between state policy and efficient market function.
Yeah, so, I was at the Offshore Wind Conference last fall, and what I heard was we have 30 gigawatts of offshore wind power coming ashore. And it just seems to me that you can start running high voltage DC and AC cables, all over the ocean floor to the shoreline. But once it gets to shore, it seems like we don't quite have the transmission system to move that power to the population centers. Is that a big problem?
Yeah, look, one of my last acts as chairman of the commission was to convene a technical conference looking specifically at offshore wind integration and some of the challenges there. I think there's great opportunities there, but we got to get the interconnection issues right. And I think my former colleagues are really focused in this area. They're looking at major transmission reforms. They've already taken some pretty positive steps regarding siting and cost allocation. I think they're still wrestling with interconnection, but I'm optimistic that they'll be able to set forward some sensible reforms that can help us navigate this, because we can unleash so much renewable clean energy onto the grid if we can get these interconnection issues right.
All right, so obviously we need the interconnections, but our future new generation that's being bid into the system here in New England seems to be an awful lot of wind and a certain amount of solar as well. So these non-dispatchable resources, they're going to need energy storage, which is also needs to play. So in addition to transmission, do the capacity markets support energy storage?
Yeah, look, I'm very proud of FERC Order 841 which we undertook during my tenure at the commission as chair, to remove barriers to entry within the RTO and ISO markets, to enable storage resources to be compensated for all of their attributes, for capacity, for energy, for ancillary services. And I'm optimistic that those types of common sense, sensible reforms to remove barriers to entry and enable these resources to compete and to be compensated will really lead to their accelerated deployment. And I'm very bullish on the future for storage and its participation in these markets.
So as a prosumer with a net zero home and a light commissioner in my town, I can see that there's a lot of opportunity for the grid interactive home. FERC passed this regulation 2222 to help encourage aggregators. That seems to me they're still trying to work that out in amongst the ISOs and RTOs, but do you see that as an important part of the future?
Yeah, look, it's one of my proudest accomplishments at the commission. I just mentioned FERC Order 841. FERC Order 841 really laid sort of the legal groundwork for us to move forward with this potentially really transformative rule with FERC Order 2222, or 2x4, as some folks like to call it. To me, the compliance implementation process will be critical. It will determine whether or not this is a significant rulemaking or a historic one. I'm very optimistic about the possibilities around 2222. I think it could fundamentally alter the way we generate, transmit, and consume power in this country. When you think about it, a single electric vehicle owner or operator, or someone who has an advanced appliance or rooftop solar, doesn't have the capacity to impact a market. But if through the power of innovation and aggregation, we can harness a wide array of sources of power, suddenly you're competing with the power plant down the street. This is really exciting, and I remain very optimistic, but we got to get compliance and implementation right. It may take some time. It took us almost 4 years to complete the rule because there are so many complex jurisdictional and behind the meter issues that we had to contend with. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how that process plays out.
Yeah, as just with my finger closely connected to the New England grid, I see a lot of activities where we have a couple of municipal electric companies. We're trying to do time of use. We're trying to update our demand response, not our demand response, our net metering policies, to encourage long-term growth and let both the utility and the homeowner profit out of that. Certainly see that coming. Now, outside of the FERC regulations, though, what other regulations and policies do we need? I think that you have spoken that we need to kind of put a price on carbon. That might help to accentuate, that might make nuclear power more competitive. It may help to encourage more renewables and speed this transition. And a lot of people are arguing that that's a key part of the policy decisions.
Yeah, look, the politics on carbon pricing are tough. And I didn't arrive at this conclusion in a vacuum. I had a front row seat to the energy transition during my time at FERC. I mentioned the challenges that we had with balancing state policies with efficient market function. And what we found was, in the absence of federal legislative guidance, specifically on carbon mitigation, states were taking it upon themselves to pursue their own policies to meet their decarbonization goals. And the end result of that was difficulties within the markets. The RTOs and ISOs came to FERC and said that the status quo was untenable and that we needed to take steps. We moved what I thought was a sensible policy in different markets. It was called a minimum offer price rule in PJM. We approved CASPR rules in New England and moved on buyer side mitigation in New York. And we were just met with significant pushback and controversy, and said that this would suppress the deployment of clean energy resources and harm renewables and extend a lifeline to otherwise non-competitive fossil generation. We ran some auctions and ran an auction at PJM. I think the doom and gloom was never materialized. Costs actually went down. We didn't see costs increase for consumers. But nonetheless, it drove certain market participants to contemplate exiting the markets. So here I am. I'm confronted with a situation with, on the one hand, the existing balance between state policies and markets was not working. PJM came to us and said the status quo was untenable. On the other hand, I've got people wanting to exit the markets, which I think would have been a disaster as well. And so the conclusion I came to was that the way to thread the needle with accommodating these state decarbonization policies with efficient market function was a transparent price on carbon. Now, it would take a federal legislative solution to get to an economy-wide price on carbon, but the policy statement, the roadmap we put forward at FERC during my tenure, essentially lays out a roadmap for which stakeholders can approach FERC potentially with a price on carbon within a FERC jurisdictional market. And then FERC has the legal authority to make a determination on whether that's a just and reasonable tariff amendment or not. FERC does not have the authority to impose a price on carbon within a certain market, but should a state within a market move on a price on carbon, and should they come to the commission can make a determination on whether that's just and reasonable. Some people have said, well, that's a baby step. It won't accomplish much. I'm fine with taking the baby step. Let's see what happens if an RTO or ISO pursues a price on carbon. Let's see if it's effective. And if it turns out to be so, you may see greater adoption.
Yeah, it certainly seems that if we did it at a federal level, it would work out much better. We have here in the New England area, the RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and so we have a lot of state regulations. The munis have this new Massachusetts S.9 that requires us to be 50% non-carbon emitting by 2030, moving up to 100% by 2050. So that's definitely affecting power purchase agreements and how munis are buying power. That's having a big impact. And we can see that. We can see a huge change in the last 5 years. I've only been a commissioner in this little town of Princeton, Mass for 5 years, but you can see big changes going on through the region.
The federal politics are just tough. And particularly now at a time when Americans are feeling the pinch of inflationary pressure, particularly in the energy sector. We've got really high energy prices and energy costs right now. You can understand the difficult politics around it. That said, we do have to address climate change. We do have to address decarbonization. And I think we can't look at carbon pricing in a vacuum. It's carbon pricing or what are the alternatives? And I think if you actually priced out some of the alternatives that are being proposed, even the economics of a carbon price are superior to some of the alternatives like subsidies or command and control regulations or mandates. And so, look, I'm under no illusions that it's going to be easy to convince people that a federal price on carbon and economy-wide price on carbon is politically tenable. But let's see what the alternatives are, and maybe there could be a point in time where we arrive at a consensus around a price on carbon.
So FERC also regulates the natural gas pipelines and ports, and I think that FERC was interested to keep costs down, but it seems to me that the increased demand for natural gas, including a lot more NLG, natural gas liquids exporting, out of ports because of the Ukrainian situation, means that it would appear that natural gas prices are naturally going up.
So look, I think inflationary pressure coming out of the pandemic, some of the demand destruction that occurred prior to the pandemic, coupled with the reopening of the economy, layered on with the crisis in Ukraine and the desire on the part of the world to help our European allies get off Russian gas, has put some pressure on the forward price curve. That said, we've got such an abundant, affordable supply of natural gas in this country. If we can get the requisite pipeline infrastructure put into place, so we have, offtake, I think we can both meet our domestic needs as well as help our European allies get off Russian gas and weaken Vladimir Putin's, gas dominance over Western Europe and Germany in particular. So I think there's real opportunities in New England where you are. There's been a challenge getting pipeline infrastructure into the Northeast. The end result has been we've had Russian tankers carrying Russian LNG into Boston Harbor in a couple of previous winters. That seems like a really, really absurd outcome to me at a time when we have an abundant, affordable supply of gas here domestically. We just got to have the infrastructure in place. I think we can make it work, serve the domestic market, keep prices down for Americans, and still help our European allies get off Russian gas. Positive economic benefits at home, positive geopolitical impacts as an alternative to Russia. Also, let's not forget the carbon impact. Clean U.S. LNG displacing dirty Russian gas actually lowers global carbon emissions.
Yeah, I'm sure if we use domestic gas, we don't have to pay for the extra transportation and other infrastructure there as well. Any other comments about your role at Hogan Lovells?
Look, it's an outstanding firm. I'm very proud of what we accomplished during my tenure at FERC, and I wanted to come somewhere where I could build upon the experiences that I had. I wanted to go somewhere with a strong energy regulatory practice, a strong public policy and government relations group, and an international presence. Hogan Lovells offers all of that, and so I'm hoping to be able to take some of the experiences and what I learned at FERC and continue to work in a positive way to affect these issues in my new role at Hogan Lovells. So
Thanks so much, Neil. Really appreciate you taking the time to give us these insights.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.